welcome back to another episode of the She Overcomes podcast, where we sit down with trailblazers, change makers, and visionaries who are shaping the future in their own unique ways. She Overcomes inspires, equips, and raises up women to become their boldest selves, personally and professionally. We empower existing leaders who live with courage and confidence in community. I'm Melanie Rudd, your host and founder of She Overcomes. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have Rebekah. I'm just going to slow down for a second. Rebekah LaRobardiere. Did I get that right?
Yes. Great job.
Thank you. Okay. So Rebekah is our guest from California, actually, Redding, California. She's a wife of 20 years, a mother for 16, and a lifelong student committed to the dream of ever evolving and growing. As a certified sex and relationship coach, sexuality educator, and somatic experiencing practitioner, she is passionate about empowering women to align with their bodies rather than fight against them. She believes in embracing the ebb and flow of life cycles, helping women harness their strengths while creating space for growth. Her work is rooted in guiding women to reconnect with their humanity and rediscover the innate wisdom of their design. Her dream is to shift cultural perspectives on sex and sexuality so that in 2 generations, conversations around intimacy are rooted in health and empowerment, not shame. Because thriving shouldn't be a privilege for a few. It should be the norm for all. Rebekah, I'm so happy that you're here with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, no, you have no idea how long I've been waiting to have this conversation. You might actually. So I'm going to just share with everyone else. I had heard you on a podcast many months ago, like almost probably a year ago, is the Valentins podcast. And when I was driving and your podcast had come through, you know how that just like auto plays into the next one. And I had to re-listen to it. I mean, I feel like 100 times, and I'm sure there's AI for this right now, but I literally re-listened and wrote every single thing you said during this section. And then after a while, I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I have a phone and email. Like, why don't I just reach out to you? So, so that's like my introduction to Rebekah is being a total creep stalker online, saying like, I want to be friends. Check yes or yes.
I am so glad you did.
Yeah, thank you. So your work is centered around empowering women and couples really and helping them, but women in particular, reconnect with themselves, right? So can you tell us, for those of you who maybe don't know Rebekah or her work, just a little bit more about your journey and your work as a sex and relationship coach and somatic experiencing practitioner also. Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'll start with the somatic experiencing practitioner. Somatic means like the body.
Yes.
And it's all about how we hold memories, good, bad, or trauma in our bodies.
Yep.
Right? Our body will always remember. Mm-hmm. And so we've been socially and culturally conditioned to disregard our body and to not listen to what's actually going on and try to logic ourselves out of how we feel.
Right.
Yep. Right. Mm-hmm. And so a somatic experience practitioner pretty much, very nutshell, brings it back to the body of where do I feel this impact, whether it's a good or bad or triggers or PTSD. And this somatic experiencing came into play. It's always been there, but it was kind of focused on PTSD, right? Because people would know what to do in their head, but viscerally they'd have these responses, and we can't white knuckle our way into doing something that our body tells us it's not safe.
Right.
So our
Yep.
body's job is to protect us.
Yep.
So all that to say, that's ultimately what somatic experiencing is about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got into somatic experiencing because being a sex and relationship coach, I had a lot of clients come to me with triggers of wanting to avoid sex, sexuality, even
Right.
conversations.
Yeah.
And trauma in my world is too much, too fast for your nervous system to process. So
Right.
too much, too fast, too soon.
Yep.
Right. And so it lands in our body. And
Yeah.
so we know the answers in our head, but our body doesn't believe it's safe enough. So working with couples or individuals around their sex and sexuality, it is very difficult to say, well, just do this.
Right.
And because that doesn't work. And so
Yeah.
allowing their body to communicate to them and actually stop betraying themselves
Yep.
by over logicking.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Over logicking. That is such an amazing term. Is that by over logicking? So, tell us some more. Like, how did you get involved in this, and like, what inspired you to as a practice, as someone now as a coach doing this type of work? Like, how did that happen? What was your process?
Great question. So I got married
Yes.
and decided. So I grew up in a conservative family and culture, and there wasn't much conversation around sex or sexuality. I grew up on a farm, so I knew the logistics of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yet, when it came to actually having a healthy, thriving, intimate relationship, I thought if I did everything right,
Yes. Yeah.
staying, do everything perfectly,
Yeah.
I was going to have the most amazing marriage and sex life.
Yeah.
And our honeymoon was a disaster because I did everything right and realized what I didn't know actually did hurt me.
Yeah.
And so we came home from our honeymoon and I started buying books.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do what I do because not because it was easy for me or a walk in the park. It's because I had to fight for something.
Yeah.
I went after it, and I'm so passionate about relationships and embracing who we are, and we can't separate our sexuality from our humanity, which we've been taught to try to do. Which of course we're going to get defensive in a relationship because we are trying to hide part of who we are, and so if we're trying to hide, we're going to be defensive. So if we can stop hiding, we don't have to be defensive. And so it's been a 20-year journey of my work for myself, and then just continuing to learn and grow so that I could talk to anyone that wants to talk to me. If you want to talk about it, I'm in. Let's go.
I love that. Well, and but even before we got started, and this is something I've been thinking about, is like, I'm convinced we're entitling for sure this podcast Fight Club, because I feel, like when we think about Fight Club, the first rule, of course, of Fight Club was that you don't talk about Fight Club. And the second rule is you don't talk about Fight Club, and it's like when I started like my own journey, and I'm thinking about women's health, sexuality, all of this stuff. Like, I feel like these are things that we're not, like, we just didn't talk about. I don't know exactly how old you are, but I grew up in the 90s, and that we never talked about it. There was like the purity culture, which I think was supposed to, I don't know. I mean, and I can't remember the name of that author, but it was like, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. But
Joshua Harris.
Who later I think came out and said, like, I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah.
But it is what you're talking about, what you're doing, I feel like isn't normalized. It's not part of a normal conversation. Normal. I don't know if I should use that term, normal. It's something that we don't really talk about, and it feels kind of like naughty, or it feels inappropriate or whatever. And so I love that you're just like, no, let's go for this. Let's have these the hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more when, with I think somatic, like, I love that term. I feel like right now I'm learning a lot about it. And, and I can't recall if I shared this with you, but I've done a ton of EMDR therapy. I was probably like 12 years ago, I started seeing this therapist, and for one of my kids, because I just was like, if he can connect with her, then maybe I can, do better. And she
Yeah.
was like, he's not really doing this. I think maybe you and I should talk. And after one meeting, she was like, I think that there's been a lot of trauma in your life, and we should address that. And I remember them looking at her sessions with Sarah. Sarah's her name. And my daughter jokingly, now it's a joke, sessions with Sarah. Anyway, but she said, you have a lot of trauma. Let's address that. And I laughed. I was like, I don't have any trauma. Like
What are you talking about? Right.
So, and then I started learning about it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it opened an entirely new world, and I realized at that point, I don't think I've ever been in my body. Like I started to realize most of my experiences, like my body was here, and then somewhere over here was my mind observing what was happening here. And the more I read about it, I realized, like, I'm not the only one. Like I didn't know that was an experience that I was even having, and I didn't know other people were having that. And so, like, when you're talking about this, what was that process for you in helping people? What has the process, I guess, been for you in helping people be in their bodies, like be back in their bodies and be present with whatever they're doing?
Yeah, it is starting extremely small and slow.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is, we are conditioned and trained to not be in our bodies, because if you grew up in the purity culture, our body is sinful, especially as a woman.
Right. Yes.
And so, of course, we're not going to be present in our body because our body will betray us.
Right.
Whether it was spoken, insinuated, it doesn't matter. Trauma it doesn't actually have to have happened to you.
Yeah.
It can be an insinuation. It can be a thought. It can be a noise, whatever.
Yeah.
And if that gets stuck in your body, our body says it's not safe to be present.
Right.
And so we are here because our body kept us safe. So great job.
Yeah.
We've survived.
We did it. Yeah.
Yet those coping mechanisms are no longer serving us well.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of autoimmune diseases or chronic pain that doctors can't explain, or they'll just be like, well, you're in your 40s now. Right. And yes, I grew up in the 90s also.
Yeah, okay.
So we're probably the same age.
Yeah.
Where it's not actually unexplainable. It's actually because our body has tried to communicate for so many years and we haven't listened.
Yes. So now
it's getting louder.
Right. So, I've been with some of the work that I'm doing with women, we're talking about the differences between like self-sacrifice, self-abandon, all of this stuff. And I think that was one thing that had stood out to me when I had first heard you talk about not self-abandoning. And what was so funny was you said, go to the bathroom when you have to go. And honestly, when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, like it was such a tiny little thing. And I know, and I almost feel kind of embarrassed that was mind blowing for me to think about eating when I'm hungry and going to the bathroom when I have to go, because I don't know that I've ever done really either of those two things.
No.
And so like, can you talk more about those like microaggressions of self-abandonment and how that impacts our day-to-day life as women?
Well, yeah, like it is so ingrained in us that abandoning ourselves and self-sacrifice makes us holier or better or stronger or more impressive or more successful.
Right.
And so there's people that are like, okay, well, how long can I go without eating? How long can I wait to go to the bathroom? And we wear those things as badges of honor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in reality, every time we do that, our body believes it can't trust us.
Right. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the more present we can become. So when I have either a couple or an individual come to my office or Zoom, whatever, meet with me, those are the first things. Like we don't even start with sex because you have to start somewhere small where they can be present in and of themselves, not with or for someone else.
Right. So how what if you're speaking to a woman, let's just say, because that's
Mhm.
predominantly who's listening,
Right.
how do you help women teach themselves self-trust? Like what are maybe just like the top 3 things that you would do to help a woman build self-trust so that she knows she can obviously can trust herself?
I would start with those.
Yeah.
The go to the bathroom when you need to go.
Yeah.
Yes, it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
And validate and understand why they have avoided doing that.
Yes.
Right? And I get it.
Yeah.
I'm a mom of 3.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
work. And so it is inconvenient to get up and eat. And if I
Right.
didn't pack my food,
Yeah.
or I'm making sure everyone else is fed and I'm eating cold food,
Right.
and I've deprived myself of pleasure,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Not just sexual pleasure, but
Right.
pleasure in general, because we've been told that it's not ours to have.
Yes.
To
Yeah.
be a good mom, I am a less than,
Right.
which actually then reinforces for our daughters and our sons
Yeah.
that we don't matter.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yes.
not willing to have my daughters grow up believing they don't matter, or my son marrying someone and treating her that way.
Yes. Yeah.
Just conditioning.
Right.
I am not okay with it. And so
Right.
that's kind of spurred on what
Yeah.
I do, because I don't want my children to have to deal with these things that I see every day.
Right.
And
Right.
so my challenge to myself is to make sure I am willing to do or have done what I tell others to do. So I'm like, oh, have to like,
Yeah.
oh, can I take that back? I'm not quite ready.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So one of the other things that you had also shared about, like so now we're and I got to tell you, I watched this documentary like last week. I was laying in bed. I don't know what happened to me because I like love to go to bed really early, but I just it was scrolling and this documentary came up with that talked. It was a lot of it was actually affirming the dissociation from the body. It was saying like our body, like they're just, it's like, this is meat. They don't matter. And it was the most, it was, and many big movements have come from this ideology. And it's devastating, honestly, as I was watching it. I'm like, how could people believe this? And then they were like, and that was the founder of this organization. And that was the founder of this organization. This is where, Nazi Germany. And I mean, it was the craziest documentary. But, and so you talking about being in your body, one, I just want to say, like, it shouldn't be that profound, but it actually is. Like, this is
It is.
profound information, and it's profound to be honoring our bodies the way that you have suggested. And so like that again, like I said, I couldn't speak highly enough of what you're doing. Something you had said that really struck me too about women was the female cycle and how that connects to how we think and how we respond to our bodies. And you have shared just like some of the most amazing documents with me. Can you talk a little bit more about your research behind the female cycle, the body, and tapping into optimizing the brain and the body together?
Absolutely. It is one of my favorite things to talk about. We've all been kind of hating the menstrual phase of our
Right.
cycle. Like
Yep.
it's oh, here it goes again. And
Right.
instead, it's actually a beautiful phase in our cycle.
Right.
And we just haven't been given the opportunity or taken the opportunity to understand how our body works.
Right.
So
Right.
each phase of our cycle, we have different strengths
Yep.
and um, and creativity.
Yep.
And it's our bodies are designed because of our hormones
Yep.
to function differently at different times of the month. And
Yep.
our cycle hypothetically is
Sure.
28 to 32 days.
Yes.
It varies.
Yep. Yep.
But in each phase, there are different things our body works differently. So in the follicular and ovulatory phase,
Yep.
our resting cortisol is lower.
Right.
Okay. And our resting estrogen is higher. So we have more energy during that time.
Yeah.
And because lower cortisol, that's when, if you want to work out, those are the times to actually do cardio or HIIT workouts, because those type of workouts actually raise your cortisol, which is not negative or bad.
Yeah.
It just, if we live at a high stress level, our cortisol is high anyways.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then in the luteal and menstrual phase, our resting cortisol is higher and resting estrogen is lower.
Yeah.
And so those are the times to listen to what your body actually needs. Your
Right.
body may just want to rest
Yeah.
or do yoga or
Yeah.
Pilates. You may hate those things, but is that because you have this idea that they're weaker or
Right.
not as cool or
Yeah.
not as impactful?
Right.
Or is it actually something that your body needs
Yeah.
to rest more?
See,
Right?
and I remember hearing you talk about that, and I will say I'm a hit workout kind of girl. Like I want to go hard, and I have had this for some reason. I've just thought I did. What was that? It was like some beach body. Like I can't remember. It was like beach body hit workouts when my kids were younger, and I didn't go to the gym. And then later I went and did hits, and I was doing hit every day of the month almost. I mean, I would take a day off, maybe because I wanted to sleep in, and I would feel so lazy. I would tell myself, you're so lazy. This is like, get it together. All the other girls are there. You're not. And so I remember hearing you talk about that being like, wait. That's like, okay. Like I thought I was just acting kind of worthless or like feeling lazy. And then when I remember you talking about it, I was like, wait, like honestly, again, it was like, I was like back in my body, like, oh, I need to be kind to my body right now because it actually needs that. Like I don't feel like most women know that, but maybe I'm like the minority. Maybe I'm the only one that's like, oh my gosh, what rest?
No, you're not. You're not the minority
Yeah.
in that, because so I didn't realize all of this till a few years ago
Yeah.
about our cycle and our hormones and how it works. Like it is a progression, and up until semi recently,
Yeah.
women during their childbearing years
Yeah. Yeah.
weren't studied. We
Yeah.
weren't talked about. They weren't. Those were again the taboo topics that
Yeah.
you don't talk about, you don't deal with, you don't research, you don't study,
Yeah.
because it would mess up
Yeah.
procreation, right?
Right.
But it actually hindered
Right.
all of it
Yeah.
because we've betrayed our body.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And so you're not behind.
yeah, I'm not. Thank you.
You're not behind.
Well, and that, and that's also something like when we attacked, like I just was like, how do we not know this information? And I think you bring up a really good point. It hasn't been studied. Like like we don't know because it's not really common information. And I think that's why I kind of joke. I think it's Fight Club. Like this stuff is Fight Club because we don't talk about it because we don't know it. And when I recently have started to talk to women about these tools that you've brought to my attention, they're all like, wait, what? Like no one really knows. And there's a couple outliers who are like, oh yeah, I was just reading this, but they're the ones who are like studying nature and science and like they're dietitians. They're people who have given their life to this type of stuff. And they're like, oh yes, I've heard about this one tiny nugget that you've just shared, So, so like when you're working with the folks you're working with and you're talking about this cycle, can you give us some of those, like some more of those examples? I just remember one of the things you had said, like on that, like, so men are on a 24-hour regenerative cycle. And as you mentioned, women are on a 28 to 32 day cycle. How can we tap into that? What are a couple practical things women can do by being in their body and listening and paying attention?
So I would start with track your cycle.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Start small, track your cycle.
Yeah.
And when you are in the follicular phase of your cycle, and that ranges
right
7 to 10 days, depending on the length of your cycle. But realizing each month we have a time that we're more creative.
Yes.
Yep. Right? Yep. Do you ever feel or more invigorated? Yeah. So in the follicular phase, we have more creativity. Yep. Planning and brainstorming are at our peak.
Yeah.
Working memory and in implementing strategies. Yep. So if you can plan your month around your cycle, like when do you need to plan? When do you need to strategize?
Yes.
That would be an epic time.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then in the ovulatory phase, our communication and collaboration are at our all-time high.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so um, these this is when you want to do emotional connection, happy hours, interviews,
Yeah.
physical energy is higher.
Yep.
And this is when you potentially want to have those harder conversations with people.
Yeah.
Because here's the deal.
Yeah.
Timing is key
Yeah.
in relationships.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
You are still true to yourself
Yep.
if you pause or pin a conversation till you are at your best to actually handle it in a way that the receiver can actually hear it.
Yeah.
But if I am doing it during my menstrual phase, I'm jumping phases.
Yeah.
But
That's okay. Yeah.
if I did it in my menstrual phase, when our memory, our right and left hemisphere of our brain are actually communicating in our menstrual phase, we evaluate everything, we analyze everything, and our intuition is a lot higher during our menstrual phase. May not be the time to have those hard conversations because we have a harder time actually like stepping back and communicating because there's a lot more angst going on.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to the luteal.
Yeah.
The luteal phase right before the menstrual cycle, right after the ovulatory, is when we like to complete things.
Right.
We tend, we nurture, we slow down our social life.
Yeah.
So have you ever planned something a few weeks out and then the day came and you're like dreading it, but then you white knuckle your way into doing it?
Yes.
All Stop doing that. Like we have to be able to actually honor our body and our cycle and plan accordingly.
Right.
And sometimes maybe take a day or two of lighter work or different type of meetings or just do admin when you're about to start your period, because that's actually giving you a minute to breathe and listening to yourself.
You know, I love that you said that because I won't share whatever. It's Fight Club. We're going to talk whatever we want to here. But I just recently, it was right before my period, and I was like, I am angry. I could feel like I was like, I felt rage. Like, this is so funny. And I like blame my mother for this. Like, she's like happy or rage. There's like no in between, you know? And sometimes I'll be like, Mom, you're like stressing me out. I need you to like reel it in a little. But I was feeling that. I was feeling like this anxiousness and frustration. And you know, someone in my life was like, why don't you sit down for a second? Why don't you just lay here? And he pulled out like that Hallow app. I don't know if you know the Hallow app. And it's, you know, and so it's like just prayer and meditation. And I bawled. Like I was just sitting there and I'm like, and I teach this stuff. I'm teaching it to people. I'm sitting there and I'm just resting, and you know, you're breathing in for 4, breathing out for 4. And I couldn't stop sobbing. And I was like, I wasn't sad. I'm not, you know, I'm not sad necessarily, but it was just such an interesting thing to me. It's like, why does this every single month surprise me? You know, like, and I'm sure I'm like everybody else. Like we're entering the holidays. We're in the middle of the holiday season. And it's like I'm going all the time. I think when I can reflect, I'm like, oh, I think that was the first time I really sat down and actually listened, because I've been hitting it so hard, you know? And so it's interesting when you say that, like, these are the times where maybe you say no, maybe, you know? And how many times have you pushed through it? And like you said, white knuckled through it and been like, that was absolutely miserable and I hate everything.
Yes.
Yes.
And then one other tip that I would give is, in the moments we've tried not to make waves, and a lot of times as wives, we believe our job is to make our husbands' lives as convenient as possible. I want to challenge people.
Yes.
That if they are making their spouse's life convenient to their own detriment, I want them to stop, because inconveniences are opportunities for connection, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't take those opportunities, and we oftentimes overextend and make their lives extremely convenient in the follicular and ovulatory phase, because we can, right? We have all the capacity, but it stings a little bit.
Right.
And we stack it and stack it and stack it. And then we blow up at them at the end, because we betrayed ourselves not them.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And so if we can say, hey,
Yeah.
that kind of hurt my feelings, or
Yeah.
hey, this doesn't work for me. Would you man this?
Yeah.
I need help
Yep.
in the follicular and ovulatory phase,
Yep.
and be aware of what's going on in every phase. That
Right.
by the time we get to our menstrual phase,
Yep.
we are not as angsty or ragey, because
Right.
we've actually been present-ish
Yeah.
with ourselves throughout the whole month.
Yes.
But it is a compilation, and our body is saying, hey, it's not okay.
Right. Right. I like that you brought that up. Something I'm wondering about is, I feel like when you say that, like, and I don't like to, I don't know how to say this eloquently, so I'm just going to say it ugly, but
Just say it.
okay. But
It's Fight Club. We can say it however we want.
But I feel, or it seems like, now I'm like, what exactly did I want to say? Like, I feel like a lot of times so I'll just speak on my own behalf. I self-abandon to make, like, exactly what you just said. I self-abandon to make other people's lives better. And then I get mad that a partner or my children's dad or whoever did not accommodate me, but I don't actually know how to speak up sometimes.
Yeah.
How do you help women learn how to speak up? How do they, like, what does that process look like if you're working with a brand new client on, like, like you said, like, there's small building ways to build self-trust, but how do you help people learn how to speak up and self-advocate when maybe they've never done that before and don't even know how to do it?
Yeah, that is very common and a great
Yeah.
question. I will start with, okay, let's hypothetically say you're going to go out to eat.
Yeah.
And they just they defer to the partner,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Because it's easier.
Yep.
Right? I may want, and then I may not want it.
Right.
But I say, okay, anyways.
Yeah.
So my challenge is,
Yeah.
I want you one time to just say, hey, I want this.
Yes. Yeah.
I want Italian and they want Mexican.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
You can both have what you want.
Yeah.
Why do you have to only do one or the other?
Yeah. Yeah.
Your needs are just as important. I want you to just say, hey, I really want this.
Yes. Yeah.
And notice what that feels like, because it's the buildup to actually verbalizing that's oftentimes scarier than actually doing it.
Yes.
And then we don't sit in the moment of, oh, I actually did it and I was safe enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think it's interesting too. Like, I know you're working a lot with couples, but I think about times when I've had interpersonal conflict with a coworker or with, or I used to have this boss. I still feel sorry for him, to be honest. Like, I think he was cutting his teeth on leadership, and I was like, gave him a lot of content. That's what I'll say. I always push back. I would use that term. I'm going to push back on that. And one day he was like, why do you always push back on everything I say? And to be honest, I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know why I always did. I think he and I just struggled in communication. But as you talk about that, I do think that there's some, like, when you talk about that in a partnership, but I think also in working relationships, I think we often do the same thing where we're passive, and that's that passive communicator where we don't know what we need because we haven't even checked in. We don't know. And so I'm accidentally lying to you a lot, and not even on purpose. I'm not trying to be a liar. I'm just not checking in with myself enough to be able to say, no, I can't actually take this project on because I have all 75 of these things. And so then we take it on begrudgingly, we get angry, and then we form these resentments towards people that we work with or bosses because we didn't know how to speak up, And so, like, it's interesting teaching women to slow down enough so that they can recognize, actually, if I add one more thing, I am going to rage quit. I am going to, I am going to blow up, and I don't want that. And so, like, I don't think this is just a relationship with, like, your partner conversation. This is so big in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. This is a lifestyle.
Yes.
Like, we can't separate our romantic relationship interactions from the rest of the world.
Right.
It is. If
Yeah.
we don't know who we are outside of our
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
then how are we going to know ourselves inside our home?
Right. Yes. Yep.
Or
So,
if we
yeah.
don't know ourselves inside our home, how will we outside?
Right.
Right.
Right. And
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 it
don't,
is hard.
do you
It
think
is
that,
not
like,
an easy thing.
do you see more often, are women more connected in one space or the other? Are they more connected in this sphere? Or do you think it's kind of like, if they're not connected here, it's going to be hard to, like, let's say this is your personal life or your home. Is that always similar in the workplace? Do you think?
There's asterisks.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. Yeah. Whoops.
So many asterisks.
Yeah.
But yes,
Yeah.
if I am disconnected and disassociated from myself at home,
Yeah.
then I will most likely be at work.
Right. Right.
Yet a lot of people take on roles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I've got the mom hat, the wife hat, the friend hat, the work, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, all of
Yeah.
those. And so one of the things I try to do is get rid of the hats.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
you just get to be you.
Yeah.
You're not all these different people.
Yeah.
You are one person that gets to
Yeah.
do all these things.
Yes.
And so I can show up as me, and I will show up differently depending on where I am in my cycle.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
But my children will get the same
Yeah.
me as my clients get, as
Yes.
my husband gets. Right. My husband gets the romantic side of it. But as a human, they each get to experience me where I'm at.
Yes.
And so I'm not changing hats according to where I'm at.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I think that sounds like living a life of congruence, right? Yeah. In the way that you do that, you have to know who you are then. Regardless of the task, you have to, and that's a self-worth thing. That, to me, I think that's like an inside job kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, will you talk a little bit more about women when we logic I love that term, logic themselves out of it. Can you talk a little bit more in context of like, well, what does that look like? Or can you define that, kind of unpack what you mean by that?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first thought that comes to mind is when our husband wants to have sex and we're not in the mood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we're like, well, we have to because, all of the things we've been taught. If I don't give him sex, he's going to go somewhere else and then it's my fault.
Yes.
And it's not. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for
saying that. We are
that.
not responsible for our husband or his actions, period.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
He is responsible for him.
Yep.
And I am responsible for me.
Yeah.
Period.
Yes. And
if we continue to betray ourselves at giving him the sex he wants, which is actually not the sex he wants, because he wants connection just like we do, but he doesn't know how to get it because we've actually not tapped into what are we actually giving, what do we actually want, right?
Yeah.
And so we then have obligatory sex, which becomes a resentful thing.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're going to keep asking because they're hoping that at some point, they will get what they want, and we resent them more. But it's actually we resent ourselves because we are continuing to betray ourselves and not saying no.
Yeah.
Or giving them another option. Hey, I don't really feel like having sex tonight. Or can you define what sex is tonight?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you wanting it because you can't sleep? So many reasons. Or I'm bored. Okay?
Great.
You can do it for so many different reasons.
Yes.
And if you're not willing to ask, why do you want to have sex with me right now? Because I'm not feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've just spent the day working with kids and I'm exhausted, and all I really want to do is curl up on the couch and I would love to snuggle you and you just hold me.
Yeah.
But I can't say that because that would be selfish because I deprive you of what you want. And in reality, that is the kindest, least selfish thing you could do for you or him.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually ask the next layer question.
Yeah. Which
Did I answer your question? I don't even know. I ran on a tangent, and I have a tendency to do that. So sorry, you can always bring me back on track.
No, you're so great. I love that. I love that permission, because I think that we place such expectations on ourselves and then feel guilty, or like you said, like, I think that we don't know how to speak up sometimes. I feel like you feel again, like I'm like projecting onto all these other people, not in the room. I'll talk about myself. I think there's been so many times where I've lied out of a self-betrayal, because I have felt if I don't, this will happen. And so, like, I think with what you said, like being able to ask the questions, what type of connection are you looking for? I don't think I've ever heard anybody ask that type of question. Like, I always thought it was just like, like when I was married, like he wants to have sex, the end, like I got to do it. And, or whatever, and so I think like defining the connection isn't something I've ever really heard talked about. But as you were saying it, I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense, and so like what type of connection is that person looking for? And I think that that obligatory thing, there's nothing for women. I don't know, but I don't think there's anything less attractive than an obligatory experience, because it's not, like you said, it's not honoring to anyone, and so I think the question was, because I'm the same person as you and I do the same thing, is like, how do we logic ourselves in and out of these circumstances, and so I think that's I think asking the question and defining, in a sense, the relationship, or defining the experience of that night. Is that what you're saying by not, so that we don't logic ourselves out?
Correct. So we don't do the obligatory, because that is logicking ourselves into,
Right.
Well, I need to, so I disregard me.
Right.
I disregard my needs because of, well, it won't take that long.
Right.
Or he won't be upset at me, so I don't want to deal with that, so then I will.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
continual betrayal, so we logic ourselves out of being present in and of ourselves.
Yeah.
For the sake of someone or something else. And we do that at work. We do it everywhere. Because that's what we've been taught.
Of course, yes. And I think that, we had kind of talked a little bit earlier about purity culture, and I think when I think of the life, what we're living in today, you have like the ultra religious or fundamental, that Christianity space that's shames women's bodies, like we can't wear certain clothes because what if we made a man stumble? So you have like this camp over here of
that's a soapbox of mine.
yeah. And then like far on the other side, we have the objectification of women, and all we are is for sex. And that's super dysfunctional and not healthy. And none of us want that either. And so like, when you're working with people who have wildly different worldviews, whether that's that shame space of like reeling that in, because that's not that, like, that is just, in my opinion, that is just as dysfunctional and abusive as the hyper objectification of women, where they're used and abused in used for pleasure, whatever. And so like, how do you reel these two things in and unlearn and then reteach?
Yes, that is huge. It's the pendulum swing. And it's pretty much the same coin, just flip sides. And it's ultimately control, right? Because I can control you with your modesty. And as long as you believe you're less than, and your actions, dress, whatever, is going to make somebody do something, then I can control you. I'm keeping you contained, so I'm still in charge. Okay. The same with the objectification. It's still a control thing.
Wow. Yes, you're right.
So it's the flip side of the same coin. So you did a pendulum swing. So the goal is to ask yourself, is what I believe helping me or hurting me? Right? Or helping or hurting my connection with my partner or my coworker. Right? Because if I believe that I am that powerful to make a man stumble, I have discredited and devalued that man
Wow.
because
Yeah.
he's practically an animal.
Right.
I
Yeah.
have diminished that man to being an animal,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a huge disservice, and it's not respectful,
Right.
right?
Right.
Not respectful to me or to him,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so if I believe the best of that man, and yes,
Sure.
asterisks all day
All
long,
over. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
okay? Yet, if I believe the best of that man and I believe the best of myself,
Yep.
there's going to be this camaraderie of wanting to be the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So it's finding out, okay. And with sexuality, most people, this is going to be a huge overstatement potentially, but everyone has sexual trauma.
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
it's from belief systems, religion, social, cultural dynamics, whatever it is, because we all are impacted one way or another that is stored in our body.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Whether it's purity culture, over objectification, wherever you stand, when someone says the word sex or sexuality or whatever, we have visceral body responses.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And understanding what is it
Yeah.
and why is it there.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And if we don't understand ourselves, we will be controlled.
Yeah.
It's taking it back to that documentary, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If we don't know who we are looking for someone to tell us who we are.
Right. Yeah.
Then that's how we get sucked into all of these things, because I don't want to have to take ownership of my actions.
Right. Yeah.
And if I don't take ownership, then I've got a scapegoat.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
wow.
so,
and you can see it everywhere. You really can. I mean, as you're talking, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just see it in so many different spaces where people don't want to take responsibility, and it kind of like some of that Danny Silk talk. Like I'm allowing myself to feel like a victim because I'm not taking responsibility. And I actually have, I can control myself. I can't control anybody else, but I can control myself. What does that look like for taking responsibility? And some of that time, don't you think, is just educating yourself so that's what, I mean, it's not like, this isn't like victim blaming. This is like, no, actually, I just need to know what I believe in and where I land. And so that means I need to do some homework, and then heal probably from some of those, whether they're uppercase or lowercase T traumas, healing from whatever that is. And, and I was just watching this thing where it talked about, and this is, I think, many people's experience. If we don't talk about this, if we don't have open, mature conversations, I've got kids. I've got, one 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and then of course the baby, 2 years old. Holy cow. They're going to learn it from, like what I know when my kids were younger, I was like, listen, I know way more than the kids on the bus. Just ask me. Like, do not Google this. Do not ask anybody like on the playground. I will tell you everything, but I need you to have the conversation with me. And we try to make that normal with them because I think statistically, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's in like that 90 percentile of like young boys in particular are going to find pornography at a very, very, very young age. And that's going to become now their normal. And then that escalates, and then, and then girls are, I mean, it's just a crazy conversation that is so broad that like we could honestly just talk for 2 days and still.
We could.
Okay. Well, we could talk for a long time, but, a couple questions though, cause we should maybe wrap at some point.
Okay, fine.
If there's any question I didn't ask in here that you were like, you know what, if there's one thing I want these listeners to remember, is there anything you can think of that you would want to share?
My first thought would be gracious with yourself in your process.
Yeah.
And take bite off goals that you can actually accomplish, because we set goals that are very lofty for ourselves, and then we fail, and then we're like, see, I can't even follow through for myself because I'm going to work out every day for 30 days and I miss one and I've already failed.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So it's being gracious and saying, okay, I am going to say something that I want at least once this week. I will speak up for myself at least once this week.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to notice how that felt.
Yes. Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
And if you're dealing with mom guilt, like notice why and when that comes up more. Is it because I'm extra stressed and I believe I'm just failing across the board?
Yeah.
And so mom guilt is a familiar feeling in my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know what to do because we look for our body likes familiar.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if we can find an opportunity to not feel guilty or feel slightly less guilty,
Right.
notice what that feels like.
Yeah.
And let that sink into your nervous system, what slightly less guilty feels like.
Yeah.
Right.
That's amazing.
And then let that become your new normal or your new familiar. And then do that again.
Right.
And then you'll have a whole day of no mom guilt. And you'll be like, wow, that was epic.
Yeah.
Right? And then the next day you might have it, and that's okay because your nervous system knows it needs to go back to the familiar.
Sure.
And then you'll go back.
Yeah.
It's like a breathing in and out and allowing the process. It's the 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Yeah. That is actually a very healthy way to evolve and grow because those 2 steps back that you took are going to be familiar for you when you take the next 3 steps.
Yeah. Oh, I love
and so that's actually part of the healing process.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And something else I do love that you said is it's about respect and connection. You know, you had said that before, like, I think protecting connection, being respectful to yourself and to others, because I think we're often taught to be so, respect others. I think, like, I love that, like, noticing how that felt in your body and slowing down enough to be able to identify that is so, so beautiful. So, okay. So, like, as we wrap, question, what is one book you think every single person should read?
I would recommend In the Flow.
Yeah.
It is all about female hormones and cycles. It is phenomenal.
Yes. Yes.
Okay? Yep. So if it is a woman looking to understand themselves, get that book.
Okay.
If you grew up in the purity culture, highly, highly recommend the book She Deserves Better by Sheila Gregor.
Okay.
Is her last name. They are both phenomenal and kind of shed light on why we believe what we believe or information where how did I not know this? Right. This is my body and why didn't I know? Yeah. Because in this world, what you don't know does hurt you. Absolutely. But we were taught if you don't know, it won't hurt you.
Right. Right.
And it will.
And it will. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I actually got in the flow because of you. And so now, yeah, I have that on my bookshelf. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it's really, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to buy that second one. Okay, second, what's a quirky talent or skill that you have that most people don't know?
I can still do the splits.
That is amazing. In this edition of Fight Club. So good. Oh, well, awesome. Okay. Well, Rebekah, thank you. You're so funny and that's amazing. Tell me and the listeners, how do people find you? How do they reach you? If something you said today just like absolutely changed their life, like how can they call you and say, hi, I want to work with you for the rest of my life?
Yes, I have a website. It's rjlcoaching.com. Mm-hmm. I am on Instagram, same RJL Coaching. And I have an email.
Yes.
Much better at email than most things.
Yes. Yes. And for our local, our local women, I'm so excited to announce that Rebekah is going to be one of our keynote speakers at the She Overcomes Bold Women's Conference in March. And so stay tuned for those details. I can't wait. And we're going to have some other private fight clubs around that, ladies, that we'll be sharing a little bit more information on. So you can totally stay tuned so that you can meet Rebekah in the flesh. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Rebekah. Thank you for being with us today. And you guys, if you've enjoyed our conversation, make sure that you subscribe for more episodes when we feature more leaders like Rebekah who are making a huge impact on literally day-to-day lives of relationships and people in and out of the workplace. We want to see more women walk in their authority and power as bold leaders in every sphere of influence that they belong to. Remember, you are stronger than you think you are. Thank you so much for being with us today, Rebekah. I can't wait to see you again and to share more of your knowledge with the women in our community.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Oh, great.
I
Well,
can't
thank
wait
you.
for March.
Yes. Yeah, I know. We do. Okay, you guys. Until next time, stay inspired and lead with courage and confidence in your community. Bye.